Hi, hello and welcome. I wanted to do a little mini series that is inspired by the upcoming fall, and I thought no better palette to focus our attention on than my beloved Midnight Sun from Pat McGrath Labs. I figured all of you who follow my channel would probably not mind one bit if we spend a few days enjoying this beautiful creation, which happens to be currently ranking at the first position in terms of my favorite Pat McGrath Labs palette. And thinking about it now, I actually don't think that the position of this palette has quite changed in the ranking. I think if I were to think very deeply about all the palettes and which my current favorite Mothership would be, I still think I'm looking at them. That's why I'm not looking at you directly, because I'm looking at them thinking, is there another palette that has replaced Midnight Sun in my heart? But I don't think so. I think in terms of the Motherships, Midnight Sun definitely remains my favorite. But I'm going to start doing my makeup and we're going to briefly talk about the series. So I'm going to focus on just the Midnight Sun palette. I don't plan on pulling out other palettes because I feel like we should really try to get the most out of Midnight Sun. I'm going to, by the way, be taking the Inglot eyeshadow primer to apply as a base for my eyeshadows later. And I will do it in the very same style that I did the Prada Quad series. I will do 3 days of Midnight Sun, because even though I would love to be able to do a week, I just don't want to commit to a week. And it is also a good way to celebrate 6 years since this palette was released. I want to say it was 6 years ago when this palette was released. It was released right at the end of summer, beginning of fall, so I'm rather certain that it was about 6 years ago that this palette was released. Anyway, a tidbit that carries absolutely no importance. I'm going to take the Estee Lauder Double Wear Foundation in the shade 3N1, and you may notice that this is actually my new bottle of 3N1. The previous one finally was finished. And that is a really good thing, because I had that foundation for a shockingly long amount of time. I think possibly upwards of 8 years, because as I mentioned, it was actually passed on to me by a friend who didn't get along with the shade. And since I only use this shade when I have my summer tan on, I use it in a very limited amount of time during the year. So it has taken me quite some time to finish the foundation. But remarkably, the foundation did not change in quality one bit over the course of those 8 years, which really speaks to the quality of this foundation. I'm not even close to returning to my normal shade, which would be the 2N1, and probably I will gradually have to start mixing the two foundations before the time that I can fully go back to the 2N1 shade. But for now I think 3N1 is still my shade, so I thought I will just open the new foundation and start using it. I'm going to conceal underneath my eyes with the Bendy Avocado Concealer in the shade 3 from First Aid Beauty. I don't know if I said that. First Aid Beauty Bendy Avocado Concealer. That concealer is always such a mouthful for me to say the name of. I don't think we really ever got the chance to talk about my visit to Amsterdam to watch Hadestown. If you remember, those of you who have followed my channel for a bit longer and watched my videos right before I went on summer holiday, I mentioned that I was going to watch the musical Hadestown with my friends. But unfortunately, I did not really get the opportunity to tell you anything about that. And you're also probably wondering why I still have Hadestown on my mind after such a long time, because I did go to see the musical in July. And by all accounts, I should be over it by now. However, going to see Hadestown was incredible on so many levels that as soon as I walked out of the theater, and I think my friend who is a huge fan of the musical had the exact same feeling, as soon as we walked out of the theater, we looked at each other and we both knew that there's going to be another visit. We're not going to leave it at just the one time. So I actually went to see Hadestown 2 weeks ago. And more ridiculously, I'm going to see it again coming Saturday. I'm going to take the Prada Reset Rebalancing Setting Powder to set my foundation. I know I'm being absolutely ridiculous, but you have no idea what an enjoyable experience this has been. First, I have to applaud the Dutch cast who put the production here in the Netherlands, because when these sort of productions come here, they're usually either fully translated and acted out by a Dutch cast, or maybe there's like a West End touring crew, they will come over and put up a few shows. For example, the musical 6 was performed by a touring cast from the West End, and I was actually initially convinced that it would be the touring cast that will also perform Hadestown, but then it became clear that it's going to be, first of all, in English, and second of all, performed by a Dutch cast. And had I known nothing about the Dutch musical theater scene, I might have faced these news with quite the skepticism. However, by now I have seen several musical productions which are performed entirely by a Dutch cast, and I've always been incredibly impressed by the amount of talented people here. I don't really know why. Of course it's full of talented people everywhere, but especially these younger people who literally just came out of like the musical academy and are so incredible. I've been so impressed with them that it didn't faze me for a second that it's going to be performed by a fully Dutch cast. I was just very curious how this is going to translate on stage here. I'm going to quickly do my brows with the Too Faced Laminating Brow Wax. So the first time we went to see the musical was with a rather large group. My husband came along because he actually kind of has started enjoying musicals because of me, and he was very curious about Hadestown in particular because I think he also really quite likes the music. My friend, as I mentioned, and a couple of other colleagues from work. So we took the trip to Amsterdam because that's where the musical was playing, in a venue that I had never visited before. And as soon as I saw the stage, my hopes were already up because the stage seemed to be set up in exactly the same way that I have seen it set up on Broadway. So there are a few like elements to the show, to the staging of the show, which are rather important, and I was really hoping that they would do them. There is a stage which has like a circle, and the circle moves, and that serves a purpose in the story, and it was super well executed. And there's also this moment in the show when you have these huge lamps which they swing in unison, and like part of the lamps actually go over the audience, and I was really hoping that they're going to have that element as well, and they did. I'm sticking with Pat for the bronzer. I'm going to take the shade Desert Glow, which is a somewhat warmer bronzer shade because I think that's going to look very fitting with the look that I have in mind for today. So like I said, my hopes and dreams were completely answered, and I enjoyed every single minute, every second, every nanosecond of the experience of being there. We had extremely good seats. We were very much in front, so I could really see the actors and their facial expressions. So it was just absolutely incredible. The actors were stellar, the singing was magnificent, everyone was so incredibly good. Just every single minute, I can't even tell you how much I enjoyed it. So that's why we decided to go a second time. Now for the second time, we were also with a somewhat bigger group, but this time a different group of colleagues joined us. And I wanted to point out that the people who joined us the first time, who had pretty much no clue what Hadestown was about or what they had to expect from it, everyone walked out of the theater highly impressed. I think the funniest thing is that my husband walked out of the theater so highly impressed that in fact yesterday he took his parents to see the show, and he came back and he said that it was just as amazing as the first time. But this time we were positioned a little bit further away and on one of the balconies, so while I couldn't make out the facial expressions of the actors so well, while the first time I'm very glad that I was able to see the actors from this up close, the second time I appreciated the fact that I had a bit more of like an overview of the whole stage, so it was a slightly different experience being able to see the stage from this far away. Let's take this Chanel blush, which I think is very fitting for the fall season, and I'm pretty sure that it was also released for fall a couple of years ago. This is the shade Beige et Coral. I don't know if you remember this. It had the little imprints of leaves here. It's a really beautiful shade, not a very remarkable blush. It's very nice, but I wouldn't call it really remarkable, which is why I don't really think of it very often. Anyway, so I had mentioned to one of my good friends from outside of work several times how much I enjoyed Hadestown, and I think she likes musical well enough to have been quite curious about it, but I think she probably thought that given that I've already seen the musical twice, I probably wouldn't be interested in seeing it another time. But I told her without hesitating for a second that I will happily sacrifice myself and go see it a third time. So we're not only going to see it together for me third time, for her first time, but we're also going to be visiting the closing performance. So they extended the run of the show because it was so successful for 2 weeks. So in fact, we're watching the last show from the extended run coming Saturday. And I'm very curious if they will do something special, if there will be some sort of speeches at the end. or perhaps they will announce that the show will return next year. That wouldn't surprise me, because both times that I was there, and every single picture I've seen on Instagram of people who have posted Instagram photos of like the venue, it always seemed full. So I think the show did really well for its relatively short 2.5-month run, and I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to bring it back next year. Taking Golden Moonlight from Pat McGrath Labs to highlight. And I've also heard rumors that the venue which put the production of Hadestown up has the ambition to bring a Broadway musical to the Netherlands every 2 years. So while I would love to see Hadestown make a comeback, I would also deeply appreciate if they brought other shows here. I would die to see Hamilton on stage. I would love to see maybe Happy Ending on stage, Beetlejuice, you name it, I would love to see all of them. I know we've talked about Hadestown several times on my channel, and in my previous video I ignited the interest of several of you, so I'm wondering if any of you already went to watch it and what you thought about it. I'm going to take the Airbrush Flawless Setting Powder from Charlotte Tilbury to set my face makeup, and then we can move into the eye look. I've moved you up close and personal so we can dig into the Midnight Sun palette. Just like opening this palette and hearing how worn out the hinge sounds, this palette has been well loved, I can tell you that. So first thing I'm going to do is take this caramel mid-tone brown shade to put through my crease as our typical crease color. So something quite interesting that I noticed happened, I think, both with me and my other colleague who is also a huge fan of the show. We've listened to the music countless times. We had favorite songs, we knew a lot of the songs or most of the songs by heart, but I think there were several accounts on which our perspective of the song completely changed. Like, we experienced the song differently because we saw it staged. There were several songs that I would say upon listening to the OST I enjoyed, but I would not have called them my favorites. They didn't have the same impact on me, and then somehow, well, not surprisingly really, but seeing them on stage just hit completely differently. And if you were fellow Hadestown nerds, I would have 100% been happy to dig even deeper and tell you which songs I'm referring to. But since I know lots of you will probably have no idea even what I'm talking about when I'm referring to Hadestown, I figured talking about specific songs is something we can leave to the comment section. If you're curious about the songs that I experienced differently seeing them staged, then we can definitely continue chatting about this in my comments. I would love that. Taking a smaller pencil brush and going into the deepest brown shade over here to apply a little bit here close to the lash line and in the outer corner, just as I usually do. And moving on from musical theater to TV shows, I wanted to share with you my most recent recommendations. So first I wanted to talk about The Bear. We've talked about The Bear before. I think most of you are familiar with the show by now because it made quite the impression on lots of people. It won a lot of awards, completely deservedly, by the way. But I remember when we talked about season 3 and I mentioned that while I enjoyed season 3, I was not quite as enamored with it as I was in season 1 and 2, and I was a bit hesitant to start watching season 4 because I thought, well, if it's going to be more of the same, as much as I enjoy every part of the show, I'm just not quite into it anymore. But one of my friends gave it a positive review, so I decided to give it a watch, and I'm happy to report that while season 3 at times felt like I was almost bored, here there were a couple of moments when I experienced that issue where sometimes for me they just have a bit of a slower pacing than they should. I did not have that here all too many times, and I quite enjoyed the season overall. I very much enjoyed them digging a little bit deeper into some of the character stories. There was a bit more character and story development this time compared to the previous season, and I'm actually quite interested to see where they're going to take it in the next season because the show ended on quite the cliffhanger. Without giving anything away, I feel like it will be very interesting to see where they're going with the storyline now, considering how season 4 ended. I am now going to take a little bit of my beloved NYX glitter glue to put on my lids. I want to get the most impact out of my satiny metallic shades. I wouldn't call the shades that we're going to use metallic, but at the very least they are satin with a metallic sheen, and I would like to get the most out of them. I'm going to take a flat shader brush, and we're going to consequentially go into first this beautiful olive shade here, and then this gorgeous like bronzy neutral shade. So first taking the green shade, which is one of my favorite shades from Pat. I don't know whether you can see it on camera, what a big huge dent I have in that shade. I think this is one of the shades that I'm going to hit pan on. There are a couple of shades across my Mothership palettes where I think I'm very close to hitting pan, and two of them come from the Midnight Sun palette. This metallic green olive shade and the Blitz Astral Purple that's next to that. So this shade right here also has a really huge dent, and I'm very close to hitting pan on both of these shades. We're going to have to do a little bit of blending work here in a little bit, but I'm just first going to lay down the shades. I'm going to clean off my brush before I go into the bronzy brown. This is also a really beautiful shade. And I'm just going to wiggle my brush here in the center between the two shades to marry them together. I'm probably also going to put a little bit of sparkly in between, just for the transition to flow a little bit better and for a little bit of definition in the center of the lid. But for now I'm just going to do this wiggle motion a bit. And I'm going to also take my fluffy blending brush so that I give a little bit of a blend to the shades through my crease. Okay, going into this shade here, this is one of my least favorite Blitz Astral shades from Pat McGrath Labs, and I'm really trying to find ways to enjoy it a bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this shade as my, you know, focal point, center of the lid kind of sparkle, just to see whether I don't know that I necessarily like this look more with this shade, or I liked it better without. So I'm going to need your input on that. I will again work this shade a little bit with both shades around it so that the transition is smooth, and I'm just going to use my finger for that. But I would love to hear from you whether you like this look more without or with this shade, because this changes the tone somewhat. It brings a little bit more of like that yellow gold vibe, and I did not necessarily want the yellow gold vibe, but at the same time it does add a little bit of dimension to the look. Anyway, first world problems. I'm going to take the Skin Show shade here, of course, as my inner corner highlight. And on my lower lashes, I'm just going to pop on a little bit more of this caramel brown. I still think Jamie Lee Curtis is absolutely magnificent in her role in this show. She's so incredibly different from anything I've ever seen her before, and it is also completely flabbergasting to me how, like, what kind of makeup and what kind of unflattering light have they used in order to make her look so worn down. I mean, I know that that's totally the intention because that's her character, but I think whoever was behind the makeup and the lighting of the show has done such a fantastic job to basically bring out every single line that she has on her face, and just in the most unflattering sort of way, but I think it is done on purpose. On my lips, I've got a bit of a concoction of two Pat McGrath lipsticks. One is the Matte Trance in the shade Beautiful Stranger, which is more of like a peachy nude, and I found it a little too bright for the look that I was going for. So I wanted to tone it down, and I applied a little bit of the Satin Allure in the shade Negligee. And then I noticed that my negligee smells a bit of crayons, and I think I can taste it a bit, which is very odd because I have a Satin Allure that is older than this one, which is just fine. So that's very odd. This is not even an old lipstick. Like, I've had a Pat McGrath lipstick go bad on me. McGrath Muse, one of the Luxe Trance lipsticks, but that lipstick was from 2017. So that it found its way into the trash in the beginning of this year because it started to smell was not all that surprising to me. It's been quite a few years. But these Satin Allures, they're from like a few years ago, literally 2-3 years ago. So I'm a bit surprised that this lipstick has already gone off. Is there something about this formula that goes off quicker? Does anyone have experience with a satin allure going off on them? Because I am quite surprised. Do let me know what you thought about this look. I really love how the look turned out. I think it is such a beautiful look for fall. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!